Oh, yes! Well, I may or may not have spent a lot of yesterday making what is essentially a rant video that looks a bit stupid and foolish now, considering the fact we actually have Season 3 news! Oh my god, the content drought is almost at an end. No, it's not actually at an end. Today is the day where the Season 3 of the PvP side of things closes down, and we're kind of expecting a balance patch or something to go in the game, which hasn't happened yet, but there has been a lot of news suddenly drop about Living World Season 3, and we even have a specific release date for it, plus a trailer, kind of, sort of, maybe. So, a bit of a brag here. I actually managed to get from David Ortiz, who I chat to from NCSoft, a really nice version of this trailer, which I think is a bit better quality than what you guys have seen on YouTube already. And the trailer itself is mostly reused stuff we've already seen before. I think it's a little unfair to call it a trailer at all, except the fact it's got a little teaser in it right at the end. So basically, what this is it's a recap. That's what you're going to be seeing a fair amount of the time in the background on this video. I think that we see a couple of new things altogether. Number one, I think, is the voice acting.
A legacy was reclaimed. Long-buried secrets were uncovered.
There is new VO basically describing the events of Heart of Thorns. Reminds me an awful lot of one of the trailers we got before HOT came out, and we kind of had that recap of what had been going on in the living world. And it kind of just expresses all the big major things that happen in Heart of Thorns, including a fairly big spoiler as well they just throw out there too, so anyone still upset about that, well, your time is up. Even ArenaNet are doing it now. But right at the end, we do see this shot here. I'll let you guys have a nice slow-mode version of it right now. It really doesn't last too long. I think someone counted it as like 5.95 seconds, and that's it. But this does look very interesting, and combined with some of the more awesome information we got from related interviews, we may actually be able to guess exactly what this is, and I'd like to talk to you guys about that as well. So, in addition to this trailer, the recap, let's have a look at what else was released. Number one, and I think this is very important to look at first, is a post from Mike, who is our game director at the moment, specifically talking about this release and what ArenaNet doing in the future. Now, don't be mad at them because it sounds good for us, but it seems they are still getting to grips with their release schedule of what they want to do. Now, I'll just clarify to you all before we go into this. We were on the impression that there would be 4 big feature-related updates a year known as quarterly patches, and also there'd be Living World sort of interspersed around that too. Well, Mike's about to announce something different, that they're basically going for 6 updates a year that contain both the feature stuff and the Living World stuff. Alright, so let's hear it from his own mouth. I'm going to read this entire thing verbatim. Let's do it. He says, "Hi all, I signed off on the first episode of Living World Season 3! And we're getting ready to announce the episode and its release date," which they're about to do in like a second, basically. "I'm super proud," he says, "of the team for hitting this milestone. Over the past few weeks, the team has been processing up to 100 pieces of feedback each day, working to get all the details right. I'd like to think we all believe if we've left a forum post or a Reddit comment or something on where you want ArenaNet to do things, such as with the Heart of Thorns meta events, maybe some of that feedback has been taken on board." He says, "Reaching sign-off on an episode doesn't mean we're done. Now we integrate the episode content with the other updates that ship in this release, and with localized text and voiceover, we do final testing of all of that. To give a sense of the scope of this process, this update has about 1,500 distinct lines of new voice dialogue, each of which must be recorded, integrated, and tested in each supported language. For the player character's voice, we separately record each race-sex combination in each language, so that means 40 actors for each line." And that's quite crazy to think about, honestly. If I was in their position, I don't blame them for Season 2, or rather Season 1, where our character really didn't speak at all. That's a lot of work for every single line. So anyway, he goes on, he says, "With this release, we're bundling Living World episode with additional content for other areas of the game. You've seen that we've been following a pattern of releasing bundled update each quarter. This is a content-focused continuation of that kind of thing. Of course, we'll give this release a name, not just the July quarterly update. And we may be able to increase the pace, ramping from 4 bundled releases per year towards 6. Now, do note he says towards, but he says, so we'll move away from calling these quarterly. So there you go. It's a bit like the feature packs. We had feature pack 1 and feature pack 2, and then they sort of abandoned it and went for something else. And now with the quarterly updates, we've had quarterly patch 1, quarterly patch 2, and now they've abandoned it and gone to the... But really, this seems more, rather than a huge shift in the way that they work, just a change of the way we name it, because it would be a bit of a misnomer from this point forwards if there were 6 quarterly patches every year, right? So this is quite important as well, because before this moment, we weren't quite sure where Fractals sat or where raid updates sat in among with the quarterly updates, and maybe that's a little bit clearer now. But yeah, so he says, some of you may look back, and this is quite interesting. He says, some of you may look back nostalgically at 2013, when we shipped updates every 2 weeks. What he's talking about here is Living World Season 1, which slowly over time, I think, has begun to be misrepresented among the community. I think some people are genuinely nostalgic, but honestly, the community was not in a good state when Season 1 was coming out, and anyone who was genuinely actively playing at the time will not have forgotten that very quickly. But he goes on to say, that year we shipped a wide variety of things, 9 or 10 releases that we today call a Living World episode, plus updates to systems and content for other parts of the game, plus festivals. So it was the extreme unbundled version of this. It was nice that there was always something new, but I'm personally not wistful of that cadence, because we sacrificed so much to be able to ship that frequently. With Season 3, our goal is to deliver content sustainably, at quality, establishing a pattern we don't have to take breaks from. So read between the lines here, there is a suggestion that what we're going to get in Season 3 is on par with a lot of what we got, like in terms of quantity, dare I say, from Season 1. It's just that Season 1 was unbundled across all these little updates all over the place, while Season 3 is going to be like, here's all that same stuff, just in one big-ass content patch that's going to get thrown out, kind of thing. So this idea, it's all about focusing on sustainability, so we genuinely do know when every individual update is due. No more of this weird Season 2 stuff where some of the updates were way smaller than the other updates, and then you'd have like random breaks in the middle, even though they're supposed to be coming out every 2 weeks. Again, these are moments that are very easily forgotten these days, but that kind of sucked, and I think they're trying to avoid that this time. So he caps it out by saying, it feels great to be shipping Living World again. Thanks for your patience through the recent content draft. Having been through it, I'm sure you understand why we focused on sustainability. Stay tuned for more formal announcement and more details from ArenaNet and our partners. So those details from the partners have already dropped. That's what we're going to talk about in a second. I would like to take a moment to focus on this idea of 6, okay? Because there is an angle you can think right now that's quite pessimistic, and it's, wow, we're only going to get 6 updates that push the story forward every year. And that might sound really terrible, but I would like to point out further that if we assume these content patches might actually be of reasonable size, that's not actually any worse, and that's still much better than what we've gone through for the past, like, 2 to 3 years. I mean, if you really think about it, Season 2 of The Living World was almost 2 years worth of content there for the year that it released, and then the massive amount of gap that we had until Heart of Thorns finally came out about a year after it released. Then we had Heart of Thorns, yes, but it was fairly small, and we've almost had sort of a year again now. So the idea that we're going to get 6 every year, it does put us on track if we fast forward the clock another 3 years into the future to having a lot more than the past 3 years we've just gone through. Maybe that's a little bit optimistic of me, but hey, I'm an optimistic guy. Right, so moving on, let's talk a little bit about what came from MMORPG.com. First of all, they did host this trailer. Supposedly, it's a recap more than anything, with the little shot at the end. The only thing I really noticed new, except for the voice acting and the shot at the end, was there was a moment with Kaith where she sees a giant light shine up in the sky far away, and I don't actually remember that happening in the story. But maybe it did and I just didn't realize. But they also, as a companion to this, had a bit of an article. Same can be said for Massively. Now, Massively had the better article, so we're actually going to focus on that for now. Massively seemed to have put a bit more research into what they were talking about. So let's look at those details, shall we? First of all, they confirmed that this was the information they got from E3. Remember that ArenaNet were at E3, they never made a big fuss of it, but some members of the press got to talk to them, and this was the information they were privy to, the Season 3 stuff, so we're now sort of all on the same page once again, I suppose. The update, as they reveal, is called Out of the Shadows. Who remembers these cool taglines? Whether you can actually draw any story ideas from that, I think is quite unlikely, but hey, they explicitly say that the story picks up right where Heart of Thorns left off. That's a weird comment to me because, I mean, in terms of the timeline, are they actually going to treat it as a year's gone forward? I think they will, because they've always tried to have parity between the real-world timeline and Tyrion timeline for a while now. So they're saying it picks up where Heart of Thorns left off. It sort of doesn't. There will have been a big gap, I'm guessing, but maybe there won't. We'll see. Next, they have a very interesting comment about the business model. Now, I mentioned on a stream very recently that people should watch out at this release of information for talk of the business model, because there was a chance maybe ArenaNet would change it, given how they bundled Living World Season 2 in the end, and there wasn't too much incentive to get it, and people felt kind of cheated out of it. But it seems they're going with, generally speaking, the same idea that they had always established. And that is that while Living World updates are coming out, if you log in the period of time that is the current release, you get it for free, and they're using this new term of banking it, right? That banks it to your account. Forevermore, you can play it without having to pay, go through a paywall to get it. However, if you didn't have Guild Wars 2 uninstalled, if you've completely quit the game for several months in a row, potentially, between these 6 updates, I almost said quarterly updates there, between these 6 updates, if you didn't have the game and you didn't bank it, you will still have to pay to get access to it. Now, the one caveat and twist to this that is different to the way things worked in Season 2 is that you need Heart of Thorns to access Season 3, but if you don't have Heart of Thorns, if you're just a free-to-play account, for example, and you log in at a period of time where one of these Living World updates is going, you'll still bank it anyway. And that's quite clever of ArenaNet, I think, because what's going to happen is you're going to get a lot of free-to-play people who are actively playing the game, banking these Living World updates, and thinking, wow, yeah, this is a cool little perk I've got here, but I can't access it because I don't have Heart of Thorns itself. So they see that it's this stuff sort of in waiting on the account, and then they think, well, look, now I get more value out of Heart of Thorns, and then they're actually going to convert to a Heart of Thorns account later. So it's basically them being consumer friendly, and I think it will pay off for them because people are going to have more incentive to pick up the expansion once they see that there's all these new story chapters, maps, rewards, and whatever else, and finally we can make a judgment that says, hey, Heart of Thorns genuinely was worth $50 at this point, and they'll go for it then. Moving on from the talk about the business model, which really didn't take up too much time in the article, there was delivered to us further embellishment on something we already knew was happening this year, and that is that there was a new Fractal coming. What that Fractal was, we can only really speculate and think about with a dodgy translation of an Italian interview a while ago. Well, we now know the name of that Fractal and even a little bit about it, and something kind of interesting on top. So it's called the Chaos Isles, all right? And I want to draw your attention straight away back to this trailer we've been watching in the background. That final shot, well, do consider that could not only be Living World Season 3 itself, but there's also a pretty high chance that might be the Chaos Isles Fractal 2. Why do I say that? Well, not only is it just a possibility, but if you look at it, there's really no detail in the environment anywhere around this massive chaotic explosion, which makes me feel like it could quite easily be set in the mist. There's chunks of land all over the place, and that sounds vaguely in line with what the Fractal's supposed to be, which is this, that it's a combination of elements from several past Fractals that get combined into one thanks to a mysterious Asura. Alright, there's a lot to talk about here. Number one, the disappointment perhaps that this new Fractal, the first new Fractal that's gone in, isn't even something totally new, that they've just sort of squeezed together a bunch of things they'd already made. However, you can be pessimistic like that, or maybe you can suggest that it's just going to share a lot of visual ideas and cues from previous Fractals, but the mechanics and what's actually involved in it is going to be totally new, which I do think is more credible. But also, there's this talk about this mysterious Asura, who seems to have like control over the Fractals and just combine them together as they suggest. Now, this article from Massively also specifically name drops Dessa. And so what I'm thinking is happening here is a continuation of Dessa's story. That gets me really excited. I won't go over all the details for you guys here. You might see a dedicated video on that topic from me in the future if this is really where we're going. But it seems like maybe this mysterious Asura that's been alluded to before, this story of Dessa's boyfriend, why she's in the Fractals of the Mist, how she came to be there, what the end game is for that story, all those outstanding mysteries. I think the Fractals might actually be going into that now. And they even go as far as to clarify that the Chaos Isles isn't a single story, but rather it's the start of a new arc that will parallel the Season 3 plot. So, and that makes a lot of sense because it's kind of like Arena that's saying, all right, here's your core content and the Living World Season 3 stuff. You're going to push through that narrative, but also at the same time, for those of you who enjoy Fractals, we're going to keep adding new Fractals in, and there's going to be some kind of story going on at the same time in there too, about unrelated things, but that could take us to magical and wonderful and exciting places because, hey, it's the goddamn Mists, and they can do whatever the balls they want. That is very cool. What's cooler? The next thing that this article talks about, really massively got all the good info out there. There's a new map coming to PvP, well, sort of, called Revenge on the Capricorn. Who remembers, a little while ago, there was an update that went out. I think it was the first quarterly patch where ArenaNet were talking about something in PvP, and on their trailer at that moment, or perhaps it was on the blog post, in the background, they featured a couple of characters stood in the raid on the Capricorn, remember? And I pointed this out in a video and I said, oh, maybe this is going to be coming back. Well, it never came back. Seemed to have been left dead for a while. Has been something that people have consistently asked for, and it seems that the devs have finally done this. So a revamped version of this old retired map is coming to the game. Those who missed out on this story, maybe you've only just started playing Guild Wars 2 more recently. Back at launch, PvP had a much bigger integration with underwater combat, and underwater content featured in some small way in most maps, but there was one specific map that featured it in a big way. One of the 3 nodes you would have to hold for the Conquest game type was underwater. This was Raid on the Capricorn. Its secondary mechanic involved a cannon you could use to shoot some of the side nodes. It featured a big pirate ship in the middle and was set in this really cool little pirate town we've never seen or heard of since. When underwater content was removed from PvP in a very smart, might I add, attempt to make things more competitive there, they had no choice really but to remove the raid on the Capricorn map altogether. I partook in a little bit of data mining using Tyria 3D and showed you guys a lot of different iterations of this map that the devs have played with before, with varying levels of underwater content, but it never ended up coming into the game. Seemed to be dropped. Was another thing on this laundry list of items that ArenaNet just got rid of content instead of actually making it work, and that they needed to bring some of this stuff back. Well, they have, and it's called Revenge on the Capricorn. It does sound like it's going to change quite a lot. Apparently, there are going to be NPC enemies running around called the Pirates of the Capricorn, and they're looking for revenge, I guess, hence the name. And players are supposed to not only be fighting each other, but you also unite against this third faction. The core objective now is not a little cannon that just does damage. It was kind of crappy in the first place, let's be honest. It's a bell, and it's ringable at 3-minute intervals that will signal a cannon fire on this ship that the pirates are on. And if you, as a team, get that bell multiple times in a row, it will give you increasingly higher rewards for doing so. So it's one of these big swing mechanics that generally I would say the large swing mechanics are the more exciting PvP maps, stuff like Temple of the Silent Storm and Legacy of the Foe Fire in particular. So I think ArenaNet are running with that ball and doing that. So that's very cool. I'm looking forward to getting back to that map, and that's something for the PvPers. Hopefully after that we'll see some more genuinely new maps come into the game, but it has been so long since I've played Raid, I'm pretty sure it will feel new anyway, especially considering that there's been all these camera changes and whatever else as the games continue to be developed since it got removed. So yeah. Moving on, let's talk about the MMORPG article. I really don't have very much to say here, but you can read between the lines. It doesn't seem to say much. There are typos in it. At one point they say, we have to siege control of something. Okay, guys, let's do that. And it even starts off with a bit of a slight against the game, but whatever, I suppose. The interesting thing to point out is that this article, just like the Massively article, specifically refers to the story of the White Mantle reviving their god with the Bloodstone. Both of these articles kind of state it as fact, sort of like the devs had sat them down at E3 and said, this is the story. And that's more explicit than we actually got in the raid itself. So I think that we can probably take it as a given now that the White Mantle genuinely are using that Bloodstone from the Maguma jungle to revive their god. And again, that might seem like a minor nitpick, but for those of us following the story very closely, that hadn't been exactly said, and now it has, I suppose. And that was pretty much it. They didn't say anything better at all. In fact, a lot of major details, like the existence of Revenge on the Capricorn, weren't even touched on. So good job, MMORPG. And that's about it, guys. So there you go. Revenge on the Capricorn, Chaos Isles, Living World Season 3, 6 large patches a year. When does it all start? Well, apparently July 26th. That is 14 days away. You may finally see my channel ramp up to put out a bit more content now in light of the fact that this will be coming. July 26th. And even apparently people are saying that there might be the opportunity for testing on the 21st. Testing of a Living World update? That seems kind of weird, right? But so we shall see. What does that mean for the balance patch we were expecting around about now? Well, I think it might just get delayed for 2 weeks. And hopefully people don't fixate on the fact that it got delayed because, hey, Living World Season 3 hype! Cheers, guys. Thanks very much for watching. I'd love to know what you think. I'll see you next time. first raid introduced, obviously, a set of legendary armor, and this is the Envoy Armor. The Forsaken Thicket at the start with the Spirit Veil seemed to have such a heavy leaning towards death and ghosts and how this interacts with the